I think it was obviously national politics plays a great big part in a national election, but the local dimension is very important. I think that the Conservatives in the city had made themselves very unpopular, not just with a park and ride, but also with the library, with Fox Hill. And I think it was a general feeling that people didn't feel listened to. And if you make that mistake as a politician, I think you're on your way out.
Our previous MP was had a very high profile on social media. I mean, every day there was a photograph of Ben doing something or expressing an opinion about something. I appreciate the fact you've been busy settling in, but you don't seem to be quite so active on social media. Is this something you're not going to use?
Oh, well, social media is so important that we really know that we need to build that up. I'm very aware of that. I've got a team working for me, but I think it's always important to walk before you run. I'm sure, if I remember correctly, Ben Howlett wasn't as active tweeting and doing his social media thing from the very beginning, but he became quite active on social media towards the end of him being an MP. And I'm very ambitious with our social media, so watch this space.
You set out your policies prior to winning the election. We know you're a pro-European. You're very keen on environmental issues, traffic pollution and the like, adequate housing for Bathonians. Now you've had a few months to settle in. Would you say your priorities have changed? What is going to be your first big challenge?
So the first big challenge, because it is there and one has to obviously react to the day-to-day, is Fox Hill and social housing and homelessness. And it is also one of the subjects that we mentioned during the election. It is a social justice issue that we as Liberal Democrats are very keen to tackle, or at least to address. Grenfell has brought into a very sharp focus everything that is wrong with social housing and housing in general in this country. So unless we make a big difference here, unless I can make a difference in Bath and a big difference across the country as well, I would be very disappointed with myself.
Maybe it's a shame that local authorities aren't building council houses anymore.
Absolutely, and leaving social house building to the private sector has utterly failed. I mentioned that during my election campaign as well. We are where we are. I have asked a very important question during the latest announcement of the Secretary of State, Sajid Javid, when he announced his new planning policy, and I asked him, couldn't we lift the cap on borrowing for local councils, because currently local councils absurdly can actually invest in properties outside their local authority area for investment purposes, but we can't invest in building our own housing and our own social housing. So he gave me surprisingly a constructive answer that we should keep a very close eye on, and that is that he might look into this and be flexible. And it might be at least a step forward if councils could borrow again to build social housing.
That would be a definite plus for Bath. What about environmental issues like pollution? Transport seems to be a major issue, and it's quite interesting when you talked about Conservative policies in the area. Of course, you're an MP for Bath and you're a Lib-Dem, but B&NES is Tory controlled. We have this new West of England combined authority, which is also Tory controlled. Lots of locked doors between you and getting something done?
Well, I think my power is obviously soft power. It's about the power of persuasion, meeting the right people and finding solutions, and I want to be part of a solution. So it is about working together on solutions. Pollution is such a big issue and will become an even bigger issue that we need to probably tackle it together. And I don't want to be obstructive, I want to be constructive. The council is now been put on a list of cities or areas which have pollution levels above the legal limits, and has in theory access to funding, but it is done through a bidding, through bidding rather than just giving a certain amount of money. So the council has to put a plan together of how to tackle pollution in the city. I wait with interest to see that plan. I hope I'll be seeing a draft and hopefully the Liberal Democrats in Bath will also be given an opportunity to contribute.
Do you go along with some of the suggestions, trams, possibly a congestion charge?
I think we need to have a real vision. I know people say, oh, not another vision document, but my team is working very hard on a proper vision for Bath, where we are looking directly where actually the traffic is, the cars are coming from, and looking at very practical solutions. So when, for example, a lot of car journeys are generated by the school run, then we need to tackle that issue. I have said time and again, why are we still running diesel trains through Bath, which are very polluting, when actually there was a project, we started it, but it wasn't finished because there was lack of funding. I also think we need to be radical, and I'm talking to a lot of people about ways forward of discouraging people to come into Bath with their cars in the first place. And with everything, it has to be a little bit of a stick and a carrot thing. Of course, we can't just punish people for using their cars if we don't have a good public transport offer as an alternative. These are things that have to be looked at together, and very good and proper proposals have to be put forward. I don't think anybody has had a coherent plan yet that is deliverable, and I'm working very hard to deliver that.
Yeah, that maybe goes for the whole country, if you want to spread it that far, that it is a major issue. People think they have the right to get in their car and drive it wherever they want.
I mean, ultimately, we have to recognize that, for example, in a city like Bath, cars don't shop. So if it's important for footfall that we have people coming in by their cars, I think a lot of businesses are starting to rethink how useful it actually is to still have cars driving through Bath city centre. It's important to look at all options.
Yeah, we're building at the moment in Bath one hotel after another with no car parking facilities. Some would say that's a good idea. Let guests walk from the railway station or the bus station.
Well, and hotels could put in small minibus services. I mean, there's a lot of flexibility. It's time to be creative, but just keeping the level of car use through the Bath city centre as it currently is just not an option.
You're well aware that this city makes a good deal of money out of the heritage business. It is a World Heritage City. How difficult is it to balance that against the wishes and the needs of Bathonians, the people who choose to live and work here and bring up their children here?
I don't think the heritage status is actually against Bathonians. I think the balance that has to be right is between the residents and the tourist business. And as much as tourism is a very, very important business and local sector in our city, we can't allow the city to just be a city for tourists. So the balance has to be right. And yes, absolutely, the springing up of more and more hotels in the city centre and the taking away of affordable housing for people living in Bath, that can't be right. But also, one of my big things is, why do we have these massive buses, tourist buses, going through the city centre? The tourists are not even stepping off the bus. They're not even contributing to the local economy. Again, looking back at the pollution issues, why are these big buses in Bath? Again, I think there are some big questions that need to be asked of the way the city's going. Same thing with party houses. They're becoming more and more of an issue in the city centre, and I had lots of representations from people who think that A, they're not safe, for the residents around it, they're a nuisance, and they need to be better regulated.
Good stuff. You've got plenty to be getting on with. Can we end the confusion over the Brexit referendum? Do the Lib-Dems generally go along with Brexit as long as it's a good deal? Or if Theresa May suddenly announced, yes, she would put it to the people at the end of the negotiations, are the Lib-Dems saying that it should say in that piece of paper that you vote upon, do you go along with these negotiations and vote yes to continue to leave, or do you not agree with what the government has worked out and you want to stay in Europe. I'm not clear whether the Lib-Dems want us to stay in Europe 100% with no Brexit at all, or whether you're saying if it's a good deal, then we can vote, that's the deal we want.
We saying we are a Remain party. We believe that we currently have the best deal in Europe. But if we say we want to put it to the people, exactly that means that we leave it up to the people to decide whether they think it's a good deal or not a good deal. And I can't see why the government should be afraid of that. If they're negotiating a good deal, something that's very advantageous for the future of Britain, why should they be worried that people would say no to that? And I say people can change their mind whether they're leavers or remainers. If people who currently think we should stay in the EU, but actually looking at the whole thing again, look at the deal and think actually it looks great, of course they can change their mind. Leavers and remainers can change their mind, but it should be put back to the people rather than just a government let get on with it.
So you're saying if another referendum was held and the majority of people did not like the deal, you would expect the government to scrap those negotiations and we remain in Europe?
Well, that would be the option on the ballot paper. Remain in the EU. Obviously, we would then hopefully also be part of people who want to reform the EU, because nobody in their right mind, nobody across Europe thinks that the European Union functions perfectly as it is. But we would be part of the European Union as a full member and would be beneficiaries of all the good things of the EU. We would be beneficiaries of the peace project that the EU has been, all the things that have never been mentioned as a positive of the EU, and we therefore continue to actually make the case for remaining in the EU, because on balance, we believe our best place is within the EU.
With the greatest of respect, you are German. Are you biased because of that?
Well, I grew up in a different atmosphere, if you wish, and I also try to recognize that wars in Europe were so much more devastating for the for the civilians. Yes, we had the Blitz in this country. Yes, in Bath, 400 people were killed through a bombing raid, and that is tragic. But the dimension of that was felt on the continent in a completely different way. In my hometown in Hanover, overnight 250,000 people were made homeless, and thousands more perished. The scale is different, and yes, of course, for that reason alone, the emphasis on peace is possibly always been higher in countries like Germany. And I come from that culture where we believe in Europe because it is the biggest peace project that we've had, and we value that.
Vera, as far as Bath goes, how would you like Bathonians to remember you? I mean, that's suggesting that you're going to be gone at the next election. I'm sure you're hoping you won't be, but what would you say is your biggest challenge? The thing that if you could achieve, you could say, thank you, Bath, for having faith in me. I hope you're pleased with what I've done.
I would like Bath to become a city where everybody can live a good life, where there's good affordable housing, where there's good services, where there's good schools, where there's a fantastic cultural offer. Bath is already a wonderful place to live in, but not for everybody. And I would like Bath to be a city where everybody can live a good life, and I would like to be remembered for that.